Good morning. How's everyone doing? Woo, great. Well, I'm glad you're all here to join me to talk about the future of gender equality. I lead the work advancing gender equality in workplaces and city operations for the City and County of San Francisco's Department on the Status of Women. And as we look at the future of gender equality and in recognition of Women's History Month, we're going to start with just a quick look at where we are currently. So we can all look around and see that the world today is very different from when the women's movement first started. Women have the right to own property, to access educational opportunities, to pursue a career of their choice, control whether and when to have children, and to vote. But while these rights have been established, they are far from a reality for so many women. And especially for women whose gender intersects with other forms of oppression. Women who are immigrants, disabled, trans, living in poverty, African American, Asian, Latina, American Indian, Muslim. These women have even greater barriers that they're facing. Lately, women have been taking to the streets, taking to Twitter, and taking to the red carpet to raise their voices about ongoing inequality. And if you have the right to reproductive health care, but it matters who employs you or where you live, whether you can access it, then we think that's really not equality. If we have laws that prohibit employment discrimination, but a pregnant worker can be fired for requesting a stool to continue to perform their work, then we really are not there yet in terms of an equal society. And we know that women are still not valued equally. What the Me Too movement has recently illustrated is the violence that persists against women, whether on the street, in their homes, or at work. We are moving in the right direction, but the statistics are still pretty dismal. 2 in 3 women in the US have experienced some form of street harassment. That could be groping, leering, being followed. And for women of color and LGBT individuals, they experience that much more regularly. On average, 24 people per minute are victims of rape, harassment, or assault by a partner. That's 1 in 4 women who experience severe physical violence in their lifetime. And the statistics are, for African American women, 35% more likely to have that type of experience in their lifetime. And when we look at sexual harassment in the workplace, at best, 25% of women have experienced that. So it's all too common. And the unfortunate thing is that even when women report it, 3/4 of them experience some form of retaliation. So they're the ones facing the consequences for reporting this behavior. So we need to hold perpetrators of harassment, abuse, and rape accountable, and that's one part. But we also need to be thinking about valuing women as equals and holding decision-making roles in our society, as directors and CEOs and as presidents. Only 5% of Fortune 500 companies have a woman CEO. And with the current rate of change, it will take 100 years until we reach parity in the C-suite. I don't think any of us here have 100 years, maybe your little one, but we don't want to wait that long. We also had the first woman elected to the House of Representatives more than 100 years ago in 1916. But we are hovering at 20% for elected officials in the US, in Congress, in state houses, 12% of governors. So really, women are not being seen as leaders in the same way. And even when they want to run for leadership roles, when women pursue and attain higher positions, they face different standards. We had 2 of the most disliked candidates in our last presidential election. And even though the majority of voters agreed that the woman was more qualified, the man was voted in as our president. And we can discuss the specifics of how much these particular candidates had an effect on this. But in reality, we we had a situation where it was very clear that the woman who was running for president was just not valued to the same level. So we don't need to adjust just women at the top. We also need to look at women across the workforce. The opposite of the glass ceiling is called the sticky floor. And for women who are in so-called pink-collar occupations like secretaries, waitresses, did I go backwards? Sorry. Got moved down. They're held at a lower pay scale. And that is really what's holding women back from achieving pay equity. 2/3 of minimum wage workers are women. And we're looking at a situation where even when they're doing the same job as men, women are paid less. And for Latinas and African American women, it's significantly less, like half of what white men are making. The current trajectory for the pay gap is not supposed to close for another 100 years as well. So 2159, that's a long ways off. When we look at women, not only are getting paid less, but they have to pay more for personal care products. So it's a 1-2 punch that's really keeping families and women out of a situation of economic security. Along the way, women are paying less into Social Security, and women over the age of 65 are twice as likely to live in poverty as men. And then we lack a national paid leave program. We all know the rest of the world has it. And despite the fact that a majority of mothers work, a majority of families have all parents in the workforce, and we also have a situation with the generations feeling the burden of caring for older family members. It's just not a situation that is accessible for everyone. Only 14% of the workforce in the US has access to paid leave, and that's typically those on the higher end of the pay scale. 1 in 4 women return to work just 2 weeks, of those who return to work, 2 weeks after giving birth. So we have women returning to work early. They need childcare. Childcare can cost, in most states, more than in-state tuition for college. And we have, oftentimes for all of that, caregivers are underpaid, and the quality is questionable in some situations. It's a pretty frightening situation for families. So all of these issues really speak to the perpetual devaluing of women and the work that women have contributed to societies, to families, and to the economy. When we look to the future, when we look at what it might hold, it's clear that we need to invest in women, to invest in gender equality. What would a gender equitable society look like? Raising future workers that are innovative, creative problem solvers is going to be the key to having a sustainable economy that can get us through the technological changes that are happening. And while baby Einstein would tell you differently, development research shows that children need to engage with an individual, with a caregiver, with a parent, in order to really have that brain development. So we need to have people providing care to children, and we need to value that work. The return on investment of early childhood education is estimated to be 12 to 1, $12 for every $1 invested. The payoffs are huge, and our economy is going to depend on this. The number of Americans who are age 65 and older is going to more than double in the next 40 years. And we have automation that's advancing at an incredible rate. And this is going to replace a lot of jobs, but it can't replace caregiving in the same way that people can do it. Investing in care is a public good. It is work. And we need people, we need children, we need to care for the disabled, elderly, the sick. We need to have a recognition that women have done the majority of care work, and they've done it for free or at an underpaid level. And so if we look at the future, we really need to be thinking about the case not only for valuing the work that women do, but making it acceptable and encouraged for men to do that work as well. And this is not only a moral choice, it is a wise choice. Care work is essential, and the monetary value of investing in care will translate to a societal value, the culture change that we need to see in order for women to be valued equally. When we talk about caregiving, we want to have men and women to be free from the restrictive gender roles that have confined them to the narrative of men providers, women nurturers. This is constraining the potential of so many people growing up in our society today. And we also need to be thinking about the flexibility of allowing women to maintain careers, of allowing men to step out and be parents. We know most families might have a father-mother combination, but that's not the reality for all families. And so we also need to recognize that there's an opportunity for all people to take out time and be nurturers, whether it's to their children or to their parents or siblings or to others. For years, the conventional wisdom has been that women are going to be the ones who value career flexibility. But we see millennial men, they want to be there when their children are born. And recent study of young MBA students found that equal numbers of men and women wanted to be taking flexible options in their career progression. So what is it going to take to get this? The future of gender equality will require a fundamental shift in our culture. Women entered the workforce in large numbers, and the workforce did not adjust. It did not recognize that now that women, mothers, are the fastest growing segment of the workforce. In order to continue our levels of productivity and investment and innovation, we need to be acknowledging that there's a huge segment of this workforce that's really not being utilized to their full extent. Women feel like they cannot step out of the workforce and provide care for their children when they want to and get back in, then you're losing a huge skilled workforce. Oftentimes women are having children later in life, so they've developed a lot of skills. They're really valuable work, but things have been really, we're at a breaking point. Things have been moving along in a way that's unsustainable. It's going to take public investment. We have an existing framework that is just not supportive of families and women. We need to have maternity leave, and beyond that, we need to have parental leave and paid family leave and child care. And right now we have a patchwork of state, local, employer-provided benefits. That's not going to work. And as we think about more global companies, more companies that are operating across the country, they are having to comply with all of these different regulations. If you live in San Francisco, you must pay 6 weeks of fully paid parental leave. If you live in New York, there are investments in those programs. If you're in Des Moines, there's not any system set up, right? So all of these different, this patchwork of regulation is making a burden on businesses. So we really need to have a demand for a federal policy. And the good news is that an investment in early education has well-documented returns, and an investment in women has well-documented returns. Globally, if 90% of what you invest in women is returned in their families and their society. And so we know that this is actually something that makes a lot of sense and has a benefit for the long-term security of our country. We also need government to commit to gender equality and in institutional way. So besides the right of women to vote, women are not in the Constitution. Gender equality is not a part of our federal laws. The US is one of a handful of countries that has not signed the UN Women's Human Rights Bill, the CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. We are in the company of Sudan and Iraq, and we are severely hindered by this. The CEDAW provides a framework to not only address issues of discrimination, but requiring proactive measures. So it's really encouraging governments to take action wherever they might be. And so we need our institutions to be supportive of gender equality. Right now, our society, our institutions imagine still sort of the leave it to beaver family, and that's just not the reality. And as we have an individual change as well that's going to accompany this, that's also going to be necessary. So we need to move away from a patriarchal society and toward gender equality, whether it's parents encouraging their daughters to consider being electricians, whether it's managers recognizing the burden of stepping out for providing care and considering that in their performance reviews. Women, mothers, oftentimes when they return from work after having a child, their productivity drops. But then it picks up and it actually exceeds what it was previously, because a lot of mothers will tell you they know how to get shit done and they're not wasting their time. And we need to have a value towards providing care for other members of our society. When we have an investment in care work predominantly done by women of color, we're going to have a greater level of equity across the spectrum. So to conclude, to say, the future is not now. Right now, we are still stuck in a restrictive path. But if we just consider a shift in the way that we view men and women, and we view their roles, and we establish a society that values those equally, it is not too difficult to get there. And we can see with the youngest generation a huge change in the way that they even just view gender. And that is going to have a lasting impact in how society as a whole views gender. So thank you all so much. I appreciate your time. And if you'd like to discuss further, I'm going to be in the breakout sessions following this. Have a great morning and enjoy the future. Thank you.
Woo! Give it up, give it up, give it up! Thanks so much, Elizabeth. That was an amazing talk on gender equality.